Welcome everybody to another fun. Oh yeah, it's not fun with flags. It's fun with Flameless Fireside tonight. So we're lucky to have Kaleb in the house. Kaleb, right? And
Yep.
you how do you pronounce your last name? Firkins?
Perkins. Yep.
Very good. So Kaleb Firkins is in the house in the hot seat, and we're gonna have a good discussion tonight. So let's go ahead and jump right in and get to know Kaleb and see who you are, where you're
Okay.
from, and give us a little background.
Okay. So I live in Idaho currently. Um, I spent 7 years in North Dakota. I would call North Dakota home. Chased oil up there from like 2010 to about 2017. Um, did a lot of different things up there. Saw that busy life. Um, and kind of rode the ups and downs. At the time, I wasn't a member of the church. Well, I was a member of the church, I just wasn't active. Um, and then in 2017, um, I had a few experiences that kind of humbled me um, and um, brought me back into the church. Um, and then I moved back to Idaho because that's where I'm from. And right now, I'm currently a welder for Double L. We weld potato harvesting equipment. I'm in school at BYU, Idaho, working towards a health psychology degree with a minor in public health. And then, um, I want to go on to graduate school. With that degree, I want to help people achieve wellness through health because I think health has so many different benefits. To be overall healthy, I think you have to be focused on just more than just health. You have to look at all aspects of your life and to achieve that overall wellness that you want. And that's kind of what I like to eventually do.
Oh,
Um,
well, good.
That's cool.
Hey, can you straighten up on your camera a little bit? You're kind of
uh,
drifting off there.
there,
There you go. Oh yeah, we
It's
gotta
like
see.
there we
sliding
go.
off to the side.
We gotta
Because
see
you
your
There we
didn't
face.
use
go.
duct tape. That's why.
I know.
It's electrical tape.
It's electrical tape.
Classic
Wait, you
welder.
should be welding that camera to the light.
Yeah, you will.
One day, huh? One day. Yeah.
Well, good. It sounds like you got a pretty interesting background. So you've been a member of the church most of your life?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
And you've been married before? Or?
Married. Yeah. I was married from 2014. And then we separated about 2016 and 2016. And then we finally got divorced in 2018.
Okay. So,
yeah.
I've been divorced a few years now, a couple years.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Dating anybody serious?
No, I'm kind of, I thought I was ready kind of, and I haven't. Um I haven't for a while, and I kind of want to like work on me. That's kind of what I've been doing. Um is kind of figuring out who I am, what I want, helping me like just become the person I want to become. Um so yeah.
Okay. That sounds good. So are you dating like for fun or just
Just
zero dating?
just dating for fun.
Just dating
Right
for
now.
fun. Okay.
Yeah.
Long distance, local girls.
More long distance. Long
Yeah.
distance. There isn't a lot of people uh where I live. Well, I guess it's just a small town.
Yeah.
It's small town, and so there isn't really a whole lot of options there. Um and so yeah, I kind of date long distance. So
Okay.
Cool.
yeah.
So do you have kids or
I when I got divorced, I gave up. I had a daughter. I had adopted her, and I gave up rights to her. But no, I have no kids.
That must
So,
have been hard.
It was, but looking back on it now, it was exactly what wanted to happen. That decision was made over like a 6-month period, with prayers and fasting and everything else. But I do know that she's taken care of, that she is definitely looked after, and that even though her mom continues to make poor choices, but yeah.
I adopted Monica, but I haven't given up rights to her yet.
Thank goodness. Made a very positive impact in my life. So
Yeah.
good thing.
We took me on the plane last Sunday.
So what do you like to do for fun, Caleb? What is your go-to?
My go-to, I think I kind of I like just hanging out with groups of people, kind of interacting. I like hiking, hunting, fishing, car rides, just, photography. I also like painting. I like sports. There's working on cars. Yeah, just
Lots of hobbies.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
kind
So
of painting do you do?
I enjoy just like watercolor and a little bit of oil painting.
Cool.
I'm starting to get into it. I use it more for just like therapeutic reasons. I'll start on something and then I'll be like, oh, like, okay, this is as far as I need to take this tonight or today. And then I'll come back to it. But yeah.
Are you self-taught, or is that something you picked up over the years, or how does it?
No, it's self-taught. I just, I'm a very visual thinker. And so if I can see it, then I'm like, oh, like, okay. And then
Okay.
I just,
I watercolor back in the day when I was younger, but it was more like by numbers.
I was gonna say, like, this back when you were like in kindergarten, Corey, or
by numbers.
I should probably take up something other than running for therapy.
Well, I do the gym as well. Like I do the gym, and I don't run as much as I should, but running is very therapeutic, especially when you hit that runner's high.
Or especially when you wake up in the morning, you can't move high. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was me this morning.
Yeah, jujitsu is good therapy for me. When I'm feeling frustrated, I just go choke a bunch of people out, make them say uncle, and I go home feeling great.
Corey will land you in jail.
I like boxing. That's one of my therapy things. I get the whole acting out your aggression, Corey. I understand.
Or Monica, she will land you in jail too.
Hey, I'm the one who gets us out of
consensual.
trouble, Terry.
It's consensual.
Sure.
The person said, "Please choke me out," and I obliged him. So
Exactly.
This gets weirder by the second.
We're all going.
You imagine somebody coming into the podcast right at that moment, like it's consensual.
up?
The person saying, "Please choke me out," and be like, "What have I walked into?"
Oh yeah, that was a jujitsu reference.
I would just be like, let me put the plastic bag over my head now.
Very, very strange, very strange. So are you work on cars, you said? So are you like into classic cars? Are you into off-road? What is it?
No, definitely classic cars. Me and my brother have gone in on a 56 Chevy
Wow.
pickup, and we're kind of restoring it right now. And so it's just a project me and him like to do. And so, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So is this going to be a 10-year project and labor of?
No, I don't. I hope not 10 years. I hope within a couple of years.
Yeah. Those could be frustrating, huh? I mean, I couldn't imagine like starting it and then having to stop for a while and then try to start back up again and then stop for a while. So
yeah.
That's just my OCD because I got to get things like when I start stuff, I got to get it done. I got to finish it. I just like I can't walk away from it knowing that it's lingering undone. It just like it just like totally rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It hangs
I'll
over
actually
your
wake
head.
up early. Yeah, I'll actually wake up early in the morning and be like, okay, I've got 3 hours of sleep, but I got to finish this.
Yep.
Yeah, back in the day back in my earlier computer days when I used to tinker with computers and rebuild them and build them from scratch and stuff for people. Yeah, I used to stay up till 2 a.m. because I was like, I'm not going to bed till this computer is up and running.
Yeah.
It was back in the day when there was like when there were 2.5-inch floppy disks, and you had to do like 56 of those things one at a time, like please insert disk 3 of 50, and you had to do that like over and over and over again until it finally you got the whole thing installed. Yeah, it would take all night sometimes. So
Yeah, for sure.
yes, Corey and Terry are probably not puzzle people.
No,
Yeah, it's
probably
gotta get
different
done.
kind of puzzles, like, putting the puzzle pieces together in a different way, not
Yeah,
necessarily on a table with a scene.
yeah, it's true.
I would
It's
just have
true.
to take glue and just glue all the pieces together. So I'm like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Well, unless I could break my projects up into tasks, then I get then I can get through them. Like, with work, there's a lot of stuff at work that takes a long time to do and to accomplish. And so I break it up into like jobs. Like, okay, well, this specific job has to be done. And then once that's done, then I move on to the next tasking. And so I think maybe if I worked on a car, I'd have to break it up in like, okay, this is upholstery week. I'm going to work until all the upholstery is done. And then, I just couldn't be like, with the puzzle, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I could go one more piece. No.
You can do
One
it.
more piece.
You can do it in sections too with a puzzle though. You can be like, okay, my goal
Maybe.
tonight is this many pieces, or it's this cloud, or
Oh.
it's this little picture.
Yeah, but what if I don't find all the pieces for the cloud? I would go crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason why I can't do that is because my punk kids would probably grab a couple pieces and I'd spend the rest of my life looking for those stupid pieces.
Oh my gosh, that
Right.
does drive me crazy. Like if a piece is missing, and I know,
Yes.
and usually like I'm pretty good at puzzles. So usually I know pretty quickly if something's missing. And if it's missing, I get so like
No.
Yeah.
I've tried to give it a chance once, and then McKenna went and got some pieces and put it in a little Ziploc bag and watched me hunt for it for the next month.
I could
And then she
totally
came
see her
down.
doing that.
Yes. And then she came down and she's like, oh, you're looking for these? They're like 4 pieces. My life was over.
That's why I only do the 25 piece puzzles. Like the big pieces.
Manageable goals, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I apparently don't start with the really small pieces that are like a 3,000 box puzzle.
Yeah, no, you need a whole kitchen table. No. Yeah, I've never in my life ever wanted to do that. People have tried to talk me into it. And I spent about 5 minutes and I'm like, I'm done. I'm out.
Yeah. It's kind of like playing bingo, you save that for when you're older. I can't do bingo either. I turn into an excited cat on the table if I have more than one card.
Exactly. Well, that kind of leads to our topic, right? Patience.
Yes.
Like, it sounds like some of us are struggling with patience. Maybe Caleb's not, because Caleb likes
No.
He likes this. He likes painting. He likes working on cars that take 2 years to complete. He's going to graduate school. Oh my gosh. Yeah. You're going to be a pretty patient guy to go through all that.
I feel it, Caleb. I'm like, those long-term projects, and there's something really satisfying about that.
Yeah, there is.
You have to organize them a totally different way though.
Yeah. So tonight's interesting topic, and we hope we see some questions and comments in the chats. But tonight's topic is like finding Mr. and Mrs. Right. But how do you do that? I mean, with patience and faith, and also, fear versus faith. Like there's definitely contrast to like, having patience and then not having patience, right? So I mean, I've had friends I've known that got divorces, and then within a couple of months they've met the next woman they're going to marry, and they're married again. It's like, whoa, like that's really fast. I mean, I'm not judging, but I think that's really fast. Like 2 months. I don't know if I'd be ready to get married in 2 months, but I don't know. What are your thoughts about that? Have you seen people get married that quick?
Yeah, there was actually, so I was at BYU, Idaho, right before COVID hit. And there was someone, they were in my psychology class, actually. This couple was, and they, at BYU, Idaho, a lot of people go there just to get married. And they went on 14 dates and he proposed. They went on a date every single day, or like 12 dates, I guess. They went on 12 dates and then he proposed to her and she said yes. And I'm like, whoa, like 2 weeks, or like just a little under 2 weeks. I was like, holy cow, that's super quick. I think that's extremely fast for me personally. Some people might think that's not, but I believe it is.
Yeah.
I don't think you can get to know a person that quick.
It's interesting. I know a couple way back in the day when I was in the young single adult ward before I got married to my my first wife. Well, I only got married once, so I should say I got married to my wife, but they went to Disneyland and they did 12 hours at Disneyland and got engaged at the end of Disneyland.
Jeez.
That's pretty fast.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
That's crazy. My ex married fairly quick. Not me. his second. I kept actually pushing my ex off. And I was just like, let's just wait, let's wait until I graduate college and let's just wait. I mean, I was pretty young when I got married. But he, I laugh about it now because I'm like, well, our ink didn't even dry from our divorce paperwork and you're married. Like, no joke, the judgment came in the mail and he was married that afternoon.
Wow.
Wow, that's crazy
It was
fast.
really fast, but they were seeing each other while we were married, so there's.
Oh well, yeah. I guess if you were, I guess you got to count that time of dating.
yeah.
Right. So when people ask him, they're like, "Well, how long were you dating before?" And he says it, and then they're like, "Well, weren't you still married then?"
Ooh,
Like,
That's out of the bag.
yep.
I just laugh.
you're like, not cool, bro. Not cool, bro.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting topic. So I definitely struggle with like the patience thing. And I struggle with the fear thing. So there's times where I'm like, oh, I'm just tired of being single. And, I'm just going to get the Dungeons and Dragons dice out and start rolling, and so, and just figure out, okay, is it going to be this girl? Nope. Is it going to be this girl? And just kind of roll the dice. I guess I still have to ask them if they win, but they might say no. But sometimes I get impatient. I'm like, it's just so much easier if I would just, pick somebody and just propose and then be done with it, right? And just get married. And then there's times where like that scares the crap out of me. Even if I was dating somebody seriously, just like getting married again, it's like I have that fear. I have that. I know it. I do. I can admit it because I had 22 years of like a crazy relationship, crazy marriage. And I think that my fear is like, I'll make the mistake again. And a lot of times you hear about people who live together, like non-members who live together for like 7 years. And the minute they got married, like something switched.
Yeah.
And like they both start driving each other crazy. Like they start
But at the same time, so Corey, I think sometimes people who are living together, my mom and my dad lived together before they were married. And I think sometimes, and they were married for 36 years before my dad passed away. And I will say that I think sometimes when you're in that in that situation where you have the ability to leave a lot easier, the reason why you're not thinking about those things long term is because you do have the ability to leave earlier or without any legal record, any legal issue of leaving. And so then the idea of getting married, then they're like, okay, we'll just get married, let's just make it official. And then they get married, and then all of a sudden they start seeing these things that they should have seen before.
Yeah.
And I tell myself all the time, I'm like, if I would have known this stuff about my ex well before we got married, I would have never gotten married.
Oh yeah, that's my same boat too.
But the same aspect, not everyone's going to be the same, and not everyone's going to do the same thing. So, I just think that, I think sometimes people are kind of on their best behavior when they realize that it's easier for the other person to leave. Just a theory.
Yeah.
I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's what it is, but
I've seen that before. Something else I thought of was just in terms of talking about fear. I think a lot of times, and Corey brought this up earlier as like fear and faith going, like we like to tend to pair fear and faith, but like in the scriptures, those aren't actually the pair, right? And I think that there's a lot of ways where like we have like faith is having a hope for things that are not seen that are true, right? And sometimes when we're in relationships, it's not about like, yeah, maybe learning to have trust in the other person and faith for the things that that you see that are true, but like you can't really expect, like you can have faith in God because he's perfect, right? But like having faith in other people is hard because there's a lot of things that might not be true that you're hoping for. So one of the things I always like to think about is that fear, like the antithesis to fear is love, right? Is perfect love. And what's interesting about that is I feel like when we're able to perfectly love people, we're also able to see them more completely and more as like whole people, which means we're able to see more of their flaws. We're able to see more of like the ways in which they put on a face. We're able to see more of that because we're not focused on like our own feelings of insecurity or our own fears. We're just focused on like loving that person as a person, as like a divine person. And it actually opens our eyes in a lot of ways. And that's not the same as like infatuation sorts of feelings of love, right? But I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, Kaleb, or if you have thoughts, but it's just something I've thought about a lot where I'm like, well, it's really hard to have faith in other people, right? Because we're imperfect. We fall short. We're not always true in the sense that even we ourselves might hope to be. But even the scriptures kind of like pair faith with love, right?
Yeah. I would completely agree with that. I think there's got to be I think there's a lot of times we go off emotions. We make a lot of emotional decisions. We're emotional creatures anyways. But we make a lot of decisions based off of emotions like fear, or we don't do something because of something. But I would agree with you, Monica, that as we love people just for who they are right at that time, I also think taking and you kind of alluded to this as well, but taking expectations off of what you want your relationship to be. Like, one of my favorite quotes is like, eternal marriage is a choice. It's an everyday choice. Does that choice get easier over time? Yes. Like you don't have to make it every day, but you do have to make like, hey, you know what? I'm going to show up for this person every day. And I think that's where it starts to cast out fear. I also think fear is cast out when we just love the person and the person feels safe enough to open up. Because then you're going to see the true person, because we all have flaws. And I think getting to a place where the mask can come off and the mask can be like, hey, you can see this person for who he is or who she is so true. And I also think that, and this is just personal opinion here, but I don't think Mr. Right and Mrs. Right exist. I don't. I think it is honestly is someone that you're willing to put time and effort into. And who puts time and effort into you, who you're willing to show up for, I think.
Yeah, I really like that a lot. I think you're totally right too about, I mean, which one of us here would be like, oh yeah, I'm like Mrs. Right or I'm Mr. Right. I think all of us would be like, well, I don't know, right? Or say like, oh, it depends. And I think you're right. I think it's really about like the safety that you create in a relationship and what effort we're willing to put into each other, right? As people, and what effort we're willing to put into the relationship. I really loved, Kaleb, what you said about safety, because I feel like in my experience, people know, like you can tell when someone is a genuine safe person and when people are being genuinely vulnerable with you and when they're not, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that's always such a good kind of, I don't know, way to take a temperature of a relationship, right? Is like how much safety you're trying to create, how much is being reciprocated, how much someone's willing to open up.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, just to kind of get on the whole fear thing, I think because a lot of us have been at least married once. I know I've only been married once. And you don't want to repeat those same mistakes, those same behaviors that you contributed to that relationship to cause the final destination of the divorce. But also I think that people forget when they get that fearful mindset that those experiences were there to guide us and to teach us, and not how to be the second time around or the third time around or however many you're on. It's there to teach us more about ourselves and how to treat the other person. And I know for me, I'm grateful for that. I'm just like, okay, you have to be ready to love, and you have to be willing to accept that love as well. And so it's kind of just you have to meet in the middle, and sometimes for me, I know like teamwork in the beginning, I always thought I want a team, and I want it, 100 or 50 or whatever. But there's days it's not like that. There are going to be days where it's 80-20, or it's going to be 50-50, or you're always, it's always moving around. And so to have that expectation is you're setting yourself up again to fail. So
especially setting those high expectations. Yeah, I mean, It's funny, we talked about this in a few podcasts ago where I told you I saw this a short podcast, a short message on YouTube, and the guy had said, look, if you want to be happy, you want to have low expectations. And it sounds horrible. It sounds like, wow, that's horrible. Like, why would you ever like shoot for a D or an F? And it's not that you're shooting for a D or an F. It's that it's more like, and we talked about this before, but it's more like if your expectations are that there are bad drivers out there. There are people that are driving, not thinking right. There are people who are new to this country and they may not drive the same as they do, in this country that they did in their country. And there's a lot of reasons why. So if you go out with the low expectation that people are going to cut you off, people are going to drive slow, they're going to get in your way, they're going to pull in front of you. And if you have that low expectation that that's going to happen, then you're not going to get angry. You're not going to be pumping your fist out the window all day long, getting frustrated because you set your expectations low. Does that make sense?
Well, and I'm gonna say something on this, Corey, just a little bit too. And we're not talking about expectations as far as like, somebody is clearly disrespecting you as an individual and as a person and being toxic and that kind of stuff. We're talking about your expectations as far as, well, when I get home, I expect the whole house to be clean.
Yes,
and
that's what I'm talking about.
Worked.
Yep.
Or, hey, I expect the laundry to be done every Saturday and put away. We're talking about that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm talking about you come home and you're like, you know what? I expected like dinner on the table, candlelight.
Yeah.
And I expected you should have makeup on and dressed to the hilt. Because as soon as I'm done eating, we're gonna run off to the bedroom. Like
I actually had I have a little saying that I say to myself and to others sometimes that expectations are resentment in utero. And I think that that's true. I mean, I think that it's one of the ways that I approach expectations, rather than saying like have really low expectations, is just say whatever someone chooses to do in a relationship for you, they are choosing to do out of love. Like they're choosing to do something like clean the house before you get home or put on makeup or whatever. They're giving you a gift, and it needs to be treated like a gift rather than something that you're owed or that you are entitled to or that you expect, right? In the relationship.
Also be mindful of how you communicate with the person, and because, okay, for prime example, I mean, I know my kids are not really, like, we're not in a relationship, but we are in a relationship, like mother-daughter, mother-son relationship. And my choice of words that I use with them, especially during texting, is, you know, I appreciate you for doing the dishes and thank you for doing this and, you know, that kind of stuff. And so it's that constant, you know, hey, just let them know that you appreciate them and you value them. Some people may not want that, but if you at least do it for yourself, then you will also get that respect in return.
Somewhere down the line.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, for sure.
So somebody had brought up, actually, sorry, my dog barks. She wants a cookie. Somebody had brought up about how people, out of fear, since we're on this topic, they move on very, very quickly to a new relationship. And I know my ex did that, and necessarily, I don't know if it was out of fear, if it was just fear of being alone or, you know, fear of change. I'm not really sure. So what is your opinion on people who move quickly strictly out of fear, whether they admit it or not?
I think, like, I think especially after like long relationships, sometimes we get there's a little bit of fear there, because our security is taken away. What we kind of know, what we kind of have become accustomed to, has been taken away. Transitions are hard for some people. I know I struggle with transitions, but I'm working on them in different aspects of life as well. And so I don't like, for some people it works. It totally works. For other people, I don't think it's such a good idea. I think if you know who you are and like kind of what you stand for, and you find that in someone else, good on you. Take the leap, I would say. But if it's an emotional reaction, I would steer clear of it. Or if it's because you're like, oh, I want that security. It's like, no, like, take a step back, realize that Heavenly Father took you out of that situation for a reason. And be like, hey, like, what do I need to learn? Like, what do I need to kind of assess from that situation? I know, you know, that's personally, I'm grateful for what I went through. Would I go through it again? No. But I've also like come to find out that the Lord, there was a purpose there. There was a purpose there, and sometimes it's to work on you. Like, sometimes the Lord wants you to work on you, and I think that's where we need to like really look at is Mr. Right or Mrs. Right is looking you right in the mirror. Truly. I think it is, it's more about becoming than finding, in my opinion.
Well, and I think too, sometimes a lot of people, when others move on very quickly, and they automatically throw out the word codependency.
Yep.
And I don't necessarily like that word, because I feel like as human beings, we are meant to not be alone. And, you know, I mean, people want to use that word, that's totally fine. But I think that in times, you can be codependent on your partner and you can be independent of your partner. But I just think that, you know, I don't know the situation. I'm kind of one of those people that I'm like, hey, I'll root you on. You know, do I think it's fast? For me, yes, that would be a little fast, especially if you do a 2 month or 3 month or 4 month. and then there's an engagement. But you know, I just cross my fingers and hope it works for them, you know. I don't know. It's hard for me to basically say it's right or it's wrong. I know my ex, he did definitely move on out of fear. He did not want to be alone.
And I think sometimes when we see people move on really quick too, it might like trigger us to be like, oh, like, hey, maybe I should start dating someone or something like that as well. And that can be great as well. But oh, you said something, Terry, that kind of sparked something. I think that we I'm trying to get it come back to me. There we really yeah. Just
Do you want some
don't let it
time
be.
to get your thoughts together?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
this is something I was thinking about with what you said, Terry, is it reminded me of other conversations where we've had where we've talked about kind of using like psychological terminology appropriately, right? And like
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with being independent at times and dependent at times, right? Codependency is enabling destructive behavior in other people, right? Like staying in a relationship and enabling destructive behavior because of whatever reason, like because you don't know how to like kind of envision a different way of being for yourself, or because there's something that you get out of that emotionally at the time or whatever, right? Which is very different from like this balance that Terry's talking about between like having times when you need to rely on someone like a partner and having times where you can be independent. And so it's just like something I wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where fear plays in on the other side, the flip side, the Russian side, where you rush in because you are like, oh, I'm getting older, and what if I miss Mr. or Mrs. Right? Like, what if I'm my fearfulness? Oh, so I'm fearful of my fearfulness having me pass by good people. Like you can get caught in this total like loop of fear where you're like, I fear to get in a relationship, but I also fear that I'm going to pass up on somebody really good. So you're like caught in a fear loop. It's kind of crazy.
Or even things like things that you want for your own life, right? Like I had a period of several years where I was like, I really want to move forward with someone if I can, because I want to have kids. Like I want to have more kids. I've one kid. I've always wanted lots of kids. Like, and so I think some of those things too are like not necessarily like it wasn't necessarily that I would say I was operating in a place of fear, but kind of operating from a place of a goal that might not even be like might not even coincide with someone that you're dating, right? And also just trying to rush a process that like can't be rushed. Like you can't, it's so much of dating and so much of relationships is outside of your control, right? That a lot of that fear and other aspects I think come from realizing that you just have to like let go of that control, let go of the process, and like work on yourself and work on being a good partner and go from there, right?
I would agree. You have to, and the thing is too, is you got to allow yourself to be vulnerable. Like like you said, you have to drop those things, drop the ego, drop, you know, get honest with yourself. I think that is a huge thing, being honest with yourself and being like, okay, what do I really want? And then like when you go out to try to find someone, you're like, hey, like kind of be open and honest with them. I took an internal families class, and the teacher in there, she was there, and she's like, and this was to a bunch of 20-year-olds, 20-year-olds, and she's like, what if your husband struggles with pornography, or what if your wife struggles with pornography? And she's like, when you're dating, have the tough conversations, have the tough talks, like let the mask down, she said, because it's important. It's important to be honest. It's important to be open. And it not only helps you and your relationship, but it also helps it also helps the other person see you for who you are, see your flaws, and it becomes more of a, instead of a team, instead of a team, it becomes more of a partnership. It becomes more of a partnership where you're supported and the other person is supported as well.
Yeah, and
For sure.
I think sometimes too, like, I mean, when you just know, right? I mean, there's that compatibility, there's everything, you just know. And I mean, for me, I know if someone's being genuine with me, and that's a huge thing. If somebody is not being genuine with me, I usually check out a tad and just go, why? Why are they not being genuine? What are they hiding? Because that's the first question that's going to go through my head. And I know that in the past, I have dated, and it was like, okay, I get what you're hiding now, and I don't want any part of that. And so, I don't know. Dating can be so tricky, but for me, I think I pretty much win in the patience category. So I can't really relate to that. I don't know. Corey may have me beat, but I doubt it.
No, you got me beat. I mean, I've been divorced since 2014. End of
Oh, see, I
2014.
even have Corey beat. So
Yeah, I got
Really?
divorced
I've been
December
divorced,
2014.
yeah, 2011. For
Okay.
me.
Yeah, so yeah, you guys have me beat. But I think
I don't know if
for
I should be
me-
celebrating that, but go ahead.
Well, I think for me also, what I fear too is like I really do care about the people I date. I worry that my damaged parts, the stuff that I went through, is going to affect like somebody who's going to fall for me. Like we date, you fall for me, and then I'm like, oh, I don't feel comfortable and I'm going to break this off. I mean, and that person's like, what is going on? So I think a lot of my fear is like, am I too broken to date? So like, I don't let people get close. I don't know.
So here's the thing, Corey, you have to understand too. Okay, I know for me, like if I get involved in somebody, I pretty much already know, where their hangups are, where their possibility reservation is. And you don't think that somebody's going to go into that and just say, I like Corey as he is, and I'm going to accept the whole package. And we're going to work through those things together. Because I guarantee you that person who is joining you also has areas that they're like, I'm not so proud of that, But that's the cool thing about it. And I'm just only going to say this because my mom and my dad had a great relationship. They had their moments. But the one thing that my mom always said, she's like, I knew what I was getting with your father, and he knew what he was getting with me. And at the end of the day, we came together and we worked on that together, and we did things together, but we allowed each other our own space.
Yeah. I think too, a lot of it comes back to what Kaleb was saying about vulnerability and what Terry was saying about like knowing when somebody's hiding something. Like for me, if someone's open about the challenges that they experience and the things that they're afraid of, like that goes so much more towards having a healthy relationship than like if someone isn't, or if someone is scared of sharing those things or they're hiding those things, then it kind of for me like affects my trust level, right? Like, and I'm not saying that we should go out on a first date and be like, here it is, right? Like, let me spill it. Like I'm talking about like as you develop a relationship, like being vulnerable as appropriate, like, throughout that relationship as it develops is really, really important. And sometimes like there are going to be cases where something is there that you have to deal with that somebody else is going to be like, I can't, right? Or that scares me, or I don't know if I can do it. And that's hard, like dealing with that type of rejection, but that's so much better. Like knowing, right, that you were vulnerable, that the other person said no, right?
Yeah.
Then cutting it off yourself and just wondering like what could have been, right?
Well,
Like it's about giving the other person the choice.
Yeah, and the other thing too, like Monica's saying, communication is a huge thing, because if you communicate it, then you're able to kind of, say, okay, well, when this happens, this is what I'm going to do. And you're able to support that individual and that person better if you have that communication and the knowledge to be able to help them in the future.
I agree. And I think it's ongoing as well. I think like as different things arise, like um you might solve one issue and then another issue might arise. And it's like, hey, like just keep opening up. I think that's, like you said, communication is huge. It's key. It's key. Being vulnerable, being open and honest, um, and telling as the relationship evolves, being like, hey, I'm struggling with this or I'm struggling with this. Admit when you have a bad day.
Yeah.
That's something that I really struggle with.
Yeah.
Admitting when I have a bad day. And
Yeah.
I've been practicing that lately because of my fear from my past relationship, being married to somebody, who's borderline. You can't share your true feelings. You can't
No.
say, I'm
Yeah.
having a bad day, because then
Yeah.
it becomes the oppression, like, victim Olympics. It's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
she's going to come back and say, well, you think you had a bad day. And then,
Yeah.
okay, well, now it's a
It turns into
competition.
a competition. Yeah.
Yeah. So I never had an opportunity when I was, for 22 years of marriage, to come home and say, oh, I had such a rough day. I really just need to decompress for a minute. And,
Yeah. And the other thing that Corey's saying too, and I know Corey and I have this in common, that both of our exes had borderline personality disorder. My ex is actually clinically diagnosed. And this was back when narcissism wasn't even a word that anyone threw out or used. And the thing is that with us, we have been trained and we've been taught not to really share our true feelings. And it's come a lot for me. It's huge. Like if I tell somebody exactly how I'm feeling, that should be an honor, because I don't do that at all.
I've been practicing that. Like, I've had people like text me or call me out of the blue, and I'm just like, okay, I'm going to be honest. I really don't want to talk right now. I had a rough day. I've been on the phone all day, solving problems, putting fires out at work, and I just don't want to talk on the phone right now. I've had to do that with my mom. I've had to do that with my boys, and it's been very uncomfortable to do that, because like Terry said, you've been conditioned that gets used against you, that you're constantly being put in the all bad or the all good, and you come home and at the moment you're in the all good, and you're afraid that if you tell them, I'm having a bad day, just leave me alone for 5 minutes, that they'll flip on you, and then you're going to be all bad. You'll be all bad. You're a horrible person for, being selfish.
Or they're a horrible person and they caused the problem. And
it was so, because my mom was also borderline. So I grew up that way, right? Where like,
you gotta watch what you say.
You couldn't share your true feelings about things. And then I ended up in a marriage where a lot of it was kind of, me carrying those things, those behaviors like on into my marriage, but also like marrying someone who kind of, he wasn't borderline, but like had some of those tendencies, right? Where like
took advantage of him.
It all had to be like, if he was having a bad day, it all had to be, the focus all had to be on him. But like, if I was having a bad day, it was like a huge problem. Like there was never any empathy. There was never any compassion. It was just like, I was the bad guy, like ruining life. Right. And so,
you suffered in silence.
That's hard. Yeah. And so it really is hard. Like, I really feel what Corey and Terry are saying. Like, I've had to work really hard when people, especially when people who I know really want to know how I feel, right? Because some people ask you like how you're doing, and they don't really care. You can just be like, I'm fine. But like when
I send you those text messages. Wait.
Terry's now thinking like, wait a minute, right? Like when people are saying like, how are you? And sometimes I've actually responded and said, I'm fine, things are good. And then gone back and said, I don't know why I just said that. Like, things are really hard. Let me be honest with you about like how things are going right now. It's a hard thing to like train yourself out of in terms of being vulnerable. And I think it also, like Corey said, I think it amplifies those feelings of brokenness, right? Like those feelings that like, you're going to be too much, because if you're used to that type of abuse in a relationship, all of your feelings, whatever they were like too much. It was just too much drama, too much this, too much that, even though you weren't dramatic, you were a normal human who had normal needs. Right. And so it amplifies that feeling that like maybe you're too broken, right? Or maybe your feelings are just going to be like too much for someone to handle. And that's hard. It's hard to train yourself out of those feelings.
It definitely is. And I will say I've actually worked very, very hard on it. And I can tell the difference. Like you said, Monica, I can tell whether someone's being genuine and they really want to know, or they just want the gossip, you know. It's being selective, but I think it's because we're trained to be selective in who we share information with and who we don't. And if I say don't say anything, I mean don't say anything. Because if it comes back, I'm gonna be like, got it. I can't trust you.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it's also a good step. Like sometimes the vulnerability in a relationship for me looks like me saying to someone, like, just so you know, like sometimes I have a really hard time, like honestly conveying how I feel or how my day's been because of these experiences that I've had. And I just have to build up enough trust to know that like, you're not going to turn around and say like, you know, gaslight me or say, oh, your feelings aren't valid. And I was like, and that just takes a little bit of time. It's just something that I'm working on. It's not you, but just so that they also, the other person also knows that that's something that's like, is going on. Like it's a dynamic, right? That affects the relationship. And so that they're clued into it so that they understand and can respond in appropriate ways.
And I think sometimes too, like just to kind of go off of that, I think for me, sometimes when I respond, I don't know how I'm feeling at that time until later. And then I'm like, wait, I was just totally not even thinking clearly. And I need to go back and rephrase this because this is actually how I feel. And it may seem kind of wishy-washy or like I'm withholding information. And that's not the case. It's just me trying to get my thoughts together.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You look like you're thinking really hard, Kaleb.
I know. I was just
I'd love to hear your thoughts. What are you thinking about all of this?
I think it's true that it has to, like, that trust level has to be built. And there's sometimes I know for me that I'm just like, look, like, I don't know what I'm feeling right now. I'm just kind of off. And it takes me time to process. And sometimes it's like a day to process like what exactly I'm feeling. You know, because I think also feelings can come from like a couple days back. Like nothing happens immediately. It all comes line upon line. I know there was like one time I was feeling like really upset, and I was like, man, like, why am I feeling upset? And what had happened was I had ate something wrong. I had ate something that didn't really agree with my body. And the next day it affected my entire outlook on the day. I wasn't sick or anything, but I was just feeling in a crappy mood. And I think sometimes we got to look at like kind of our environment, what's going on around us at that time, that might trigger. And I think that's the other thing that is so important is taking an inventory of what is happening throughout your life, throughout your day, that you're allowing to come into your life, whether it be through like the entertainment you view, whether it be through the music you view, whether it be through the food you eat, realizing all that is all of that stuff is your body's intaking in different ways. And it can affect so many different aspects of your life. It affects everything's intertwined. And so if it affects something, like if it's food and it affects your like energy levels, then it's going to affect other things. It's going to affect how you work. It's going to affect how you think. And I think that's where it comes down to like, what are you feeding your body? Like, what are you feeding your body as far as like everything, your interactions throughout the day, and how do you recognize that? How do you recognize that, and how do you like bring that into like, okay, like, hey, this is how I'm feeling, letting another person be like, hey, look, like, you know, into a relationship. So those are kind of some of my thoughts, I guess.
And I think it's kind of interesting too that you said something about like if you're having a bad day, and recognizing it or whatever. And I'm trying to be better with this myself, because sometimes I'll just say, well, there's always tomorrow. And I'm not in, like, I don't know, I'm not making their feelings valid when I say that. And I'm just trying to help, but at the same time, it's not really validating anything. Instead, I should just be like, well, how can I help you? And what can make this day better for you? And I think just being aware of how we respond to those situations is helpful. Being corrected as far as, that's not really what I needed, or that's not really what I wanted to hear. I just wanted you to listen.
Yep.
That's also a healthy request and response to,
Yeah.
I also think, like, it's something you guys were talking about too, kind of triggered the thought of boundaries.
Yeah.
And I think even within a relationship, you have to allow that person to be an individual.
Yeah.
You have to allow them to make mistakes or go and do things that they enjoy. You have to allow that time for them to be themselves as well. You can't be, it can't be always like, oh, always together. No, like, you have
Right.
to have time where it's like, yes, we're together. This is what we're doing.
Yeah.
But then there's times where it's like, I have to be me and you have to be you, and you have to support that time and let them flourish
Yeah.
as well.
So kind of interesting you said that too. I have a friend who, he's a good friend, but sometimes I just want to wring his neck. Can I say that without getting in trouble? Anyways, so he's always like, well, I want to find somebody who will do X, Y, and Z with me. Like they have to read books together. They have to go hiking these certain trails that he wants to hike and all this stuff. And literally I just was like, do you want somebody to be connected at your hip, or do you want to have a relationship? It's great if you can find that, but he complains every 3 months when he goes through a relationship and it doesn't work out because they're not ultra marathoners and they won't run 50 miles with him.
Yeah. That's something that I think a lot about in terms of, like, I think it's really important. I think it's harder now, like in modern society, in the way in which we've kind of like nuclearized the family kind of so much, and that there's not as much like community around relationships, but that we are not supposed to have all our needs met by one person. Like,
Right.
It's not supposed to work that way.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's like what I think of when you talk about your friends, Terry, is I'm like, well, if somebody isn't doing all of the things with them, like maybe he can find somebody who's doing a couple of meaningful ones, and then find the people who are going to be his marathoners, right? And maybe their person can be cheering him on the sidelines. Like it's not about finding somebody who's going to meet all of your needs.
Yeah, and that's true. And I'm glad you said that, because a lot of people get so focused on one person meeting all their needs. And you have all these groups of friends for a reason. You have all these people in your life for a reason, because everybody contributes in their own way something that you need in your life.
Yeah.
It's, I think it's a huge ask. Like Corey said before, it's a huge expectation to put all of that on one person.
For sure. And nobody's ever going to live up to that, right?
No.
But they shouldn't have to. Like,
no.
And then
you gotta set them low.
Yeah. And then like you're also
predictable.
missing out on all of these other relationships that you can have, right? With other people who are like really good at these other things that you want to do. Kaleb,
Right.
you're going to say something earlier, and I think one of us cut you off.
No, you're good. I just think I really like that. You have to, the expectations, you got to take the expectations off of people. I think, and also like generalize things. If you like to hike and you want to hike this certain mountain, like find someone who likes to hike in general, and I think evolve that into like, hey, let's hike this mountain, Or hey, if you like to do these things, like painting or photography, um, or if you like sports, like say, hey, like let's find someone who likes to do similar things. But yeah, you can't expect one person to meet individuals, and within the relationship too. Like as the relationship evolves, you can't expect that one person to do it all.
But what if though, I mean, you found this great person and they don't like anything of those things that you mentioned, right?
Mhm.
But you found a group of friends that you could go to sporting events with. You found a
Yeah.
group of friends you could go hiking with, or you found, or I go hiking by myself all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily, that's not like a thing on my list. I don't
Yeah.
enjoy hiking actually. I just do it because I just think, okay, I just want to get out.
Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
read this. I don't know if any of you have ever read A Severe Mercy. It's a really interesting book by, oh my gosh, what's his name?
I can
C.S.
look it up.
Lewis's friend. Look it up really quick.
Okay.
It's a little bit cumbersome in parts and slow in parts, and there are a lot of people who really don't like it. One thing I really loved about it was how he talks about the way that he and his wife kind of safeguarded their relationship and kind of and one of the things that he talked about was he was like, they just kind of assumed that like whatever the other person was into, that they didn't have to be into it, but like they would do their part to kind of like learn about it and figure out, like appreciate it. But then also recognize that like that other person is a good person who likes this thing and maybe doesn't like something else, and whatever value that they're a good person who's getting value out of it, and so it must be valuable, right? Of kind of like seeing it as like that's valuable to them and that's great. And like I can appreciate it and I can have my things that are valuable to me that are great that this other person doesn't really know about or care about. And what was interesting about it, I thought, was it just felt like it was giving space for the other person to be a different person. Like none of us want like another us in the relationship, right? Like it was giving them space to be like a whole person and to have totally different interests. I remember going on my honeymoon, and like one of the things that kind of, we had trouble even in our honeymoon, but like one of the things that kind of went wrong was there was a day where he wanted to go back to the room and just like rest and like sleep and read a book. And I was like, I really want to go to the beach and boogie board. And he couldn't accept the fact that like we could do those two separate things and love each other and everything could be fine. Like that wasn't like for him, that was like, no, we have to be together. And I was like, why? Like, why do we have to be together? Like it's fine if we're not together for like an afternoon. But it caused a lot of problems. And I feel like it caused a lot of problems from this expectation, right? Of wanting somebody who's like always there, always doing the thing you want to do. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah, you got to be careful with that, because that's the kind of stuff that scares me, because I was in a relationship which demanded that I always spend time with that person and never have hobbies. Because if I had hobbies, somehow that was a perceived abandonment. Like I'm leaving them to go do my hobbies. I'm leaving them to be with my friends. I'm leaving them, So it's funny because I found myself like really, really adjusting my life around like her needs. And so like I'd find jujitsu groups that practice at 6:30 in the morning so that she's still sleeping. And by the time I get home from jujitsu, she's just waking up. And therefore you can't be upset with me because I'm not taking time away from you. You're sleeping, or playing basketball at 9 o'clock at night, or getting up on Saturday morning at 6 a.m. to play basketball. But heaven forbid that I take a day off of work to go play golf with my friends. And you never heard the end of it. It was like, well, why didn't you take the day off to spend it with me? Why'd you take the day off to spend it with your friend?
Well, and it's the same thing that we keep going back to, that like, different people give us different needs. And, I mean, for me, like in my marriage, I loved being able to go on girls' trips. And, my friends offered a different perspective than like a guy can. They offer different emotional support than a guy can. Or my ex could at all. But he just perceived it as me running off with another guy. And, and that's not healthy. You should be able to have that time and, the time away without any questions.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you really are running off with another guy, then.
Well, and it's hard with like when you're talking about like borderline, like the relationships that you guys had, or possessive relationships or anything like that, because what happens in those relationships is those people are so focused on like the favorite person, right? That like they generally like lock onto one person, and then that person is like their end all be all for everything. And so everything is perceived as abandonment that doesn't have to do with them. But that's just not how healthy people function. Like, and healthy relationships function. Like it's not supposed to be that way, right?
Yeah.
And it can be really isolating for the person who's, like us, who are like trying to just spend time with friends or whatever, and then are constantly kind of berated for it or feel like we can't go away, right?
But I think also that's where fear comes in, because when you've had that once before, you're fearful that it's going to happen again. And I think that sometimes fear, unfortunately, it's sabotaging everything, and it sabotages our choices and our decisions. And when that happens, then you think, oh, I'm making the right decision, and then all of a sudden you're like, maybe I'm not.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not making the right decision.
Yeah, I think one thing that helps me when I have fears like that is just telling myself, like, I actually know a lot more than I did at the time at which I got married. Like, I know a lot more about what the clues were that it was going to be unhealthy early on. I know, like, I can recognize and trust my intuition about people now. And it helps me to kind of talk down the fears that are totally understandable, but maybe not as reasonable in the moment, right? Because it's that whole like, I'm going to be duped. I'm going to be tricked. I'm going to wake up one morning and like, this is going to be a different person than I thought.
Yeah, that's a huge fear, because you think, wow, dating is so awesome, and this person is, everybody's putting their best foot forward, right? And you're worried that that's going to change, like you said, Monica. Like you're going to wake up and that person's like, okay, you're mine now. We're married. We're locked into this thing, and so go make me breakfast.
This is how it's going to be, right?
And Corey's like, as long as the breakfast is good, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good with it. Yeah. I'm like, does room service count?
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's about also like being real with yourself about the experience that you have and the ways in which your intuition has changed and grown, the ways in which like you have a lot of knowledge that you didn't have now or then that you have now that are going to assist you in those moments, right? But it's hard to like in the moment of feeling that fear of kind of like talking yourself down and be like, wait, like, no, I generally know like when things are going awry. I generally kind of have a good sense for when someone's acting this way or has this type of personality trait, right?
And I think it's good to like ask questions, like ask the person, like be open and honest with them and say, hey, like I'm feeling this. Is this like, this is what I'm feeling, and just kind of let them express express maybe like what they're going through as well. Give them that opportunity.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie, The Heartbreak Kid? I don't know if you ever saw it on like
that
TV
sounds
or whatever.
So familiar.
It's
Who's
Ben
in
Stiller.
it?
It's Ben Stiller. So he gets married like within 2 weeks. Like he meets a girl, he falls in love, they get married, and then on their drive, they're driving to Cabo San Lucas, and on their 15-hour drive, like all of these weird things start happening. Like she sings like to every song that comes on the radio, and she has to sing like really loud, and then it's just really funny, and then they've never had sex before, obviously. So that's a huge thing in our group too, right? Because you haven't slept with a person you're going to marry again, right? So, well, maybe not. I don't know. Your personal preference, but in the movie they hadn't, and so like they pull over at some hotel because they hadn't done it yet, and they pull in, and she is like a crazy person in bed, and like he's all curled up on the couch, like sucking his thumb, like what just happened. Like she was like yelling at him, and like it was pretty funny, and like he was like, oh my gosh, like we're not sexually compatible at all. It was kind of funny, but in a joking way, we all fear that, right? We're gonna like get married to somebody and then find out like they're super annoying, or they, they're just like they were not compatible in the sack or
This is
something.
why you have to have all of these discussions, right? You have to be like,
You
okay,
have
tell me
to.
like, what is your ideal, like, what is your ideal first night? What is your ideal like 50th night gonna be
it's
like what what
like,
kinds of sexual fantasies do you have that I should know
Yeah.
about and be prepared for, and am I willing to deal with those?
like
Like, I mean, it
you ask
sounds
me to bring the handcuffs. It's like, what?
it sounds silly, but like those are things, and especially I think as adults, like we should be able to have those conversations with people, right? Something else I've thought, this is something that I've thought about a lot, is I think in LDS cultures in particular, any culture where people kind of don't condone extramarital sex, right, at all, whether it's premarital or whatever, is that for people who've had sexual abuse or other things like that in their marriage or in relationships or sexual assault, like there's also this fear of like, well, how am I going to know that this person is a safe person in this realm, like when I can't test it out, right? Like, and at what point, like, how does a discussion like that go? What are the clues that could tell me like whether or not this person is going to be a healthy person for me in the long run? Like there's a lot of that sort of stuff, right, that people have to deal with.
Yeah.
And that's hard, like especially
are
when
they gonna
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
Are they gonna run to their family? Are they gonna run to their coworkers and talk about this? Are they gonna
There's also
or are they gonna be able to deal with healthy consent, like even in a marriage relationship, right? Are they going to honor like the feelings the person's having when they're struggling in that moment? Like there's all sorts of things that, especially like if it's something like sexual abuse, right, then you have to have a really understanding partner. I mean, that's part of healing, right? But you can't test it out beforehand. That makes it hard. Like that's a real, I mean, all of these fears are real, but like it's a real fear, right?
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine like for somebody who really enjoys sex and they're really into it and they think sex is like the lubricant of the marriage gears, and having lots of sex is something that's really important in a marriage, right? But what if the other partner you marry is like, oh my gosh, like I've been abused and I was cheated on, and sex was horrible, and I've got psychological pent up issues about sex because my parents raised me that sex is dirty and disgusting and of the devil. And and then you blend those two together where a guy's like, I want it all the time, and she's like, you're a disgusting pervert, right?
Or vice versa, right? I mean, it could be like the woman. I was the high drive partner in my marriage. I'm just gonna say, like,
oh yeah, no, yeah,
for sure.
Well,
but yeah, so it could be like a fear. It could be the fear of sex. It could also be that like the person who's been abused wants to have a healthy sexual relationship, right? But understanding how to work with that person and like what kinds of counseling you should get and how you work through it to make that successful so that you're both at a good place, is hard.
No, it's difficult. And there's also the issue when I've seen the discussions in the chats before when we've had conversations about sex, because we're not talking about sex, we're talking generalities, but people have said, oh my gosh, you can't have the discussion because that might lead to temptation. It might lead to bad thoughts. It might lead to you guys jumping in the sack. And then you're right there. You're like, okay, time out. I can already tell you're pent up about sex. Like you're already having about sex. Because you hear people all the time, like somebody will post something on the Facebook, and then there'll be one or two comments where somebody says, this is inappropriate. Or you might even get 2 or 3 people might jump off the podcast right now going, oh, this is inappropriate conversation talking about, sexual compatibility. And well, then you've got some issues you need to work on.
Yeah. A mature, respectful conversation about sexual compatibility, like is never, like, to me, that's never inappropriate, right? It's really, really actually important. I think it's important for people who are younger, who've never been married and never had sex, to have those conversations. Like, and I remember asking some pretty like explicit questions of my ex because I was nervous about stuff. And I was like, I feel like these are things I need to know. And in the moment, I think because we were both young, it was kind of like, awkward, but like
awkward.
Yeah. But there were things that it actually, I think, better prepared me for like what was going to happen, So I think that was a good thing. And I think people should be talking about those things. And if you're not willing to talk about those things in a mature way, and by mature, I mean, that doesn't mean that funny things aren't going to come up and you might both crack up laughing about ridiculousness, because that happens with sex, right? But like, being able to handle it in a mature way is really, really important. And if you can't do that, then it is time to kind of look at yourself and say, okay, what are my anxieties about sex? Like, what am I trying to kind of push down? That's coming up in this moment for me.
Yeah. I mean, I've said this before in past podcasts, but like when I first got married, like my ex and I, my wife at the time, we just got married. We had those conversations, but then we had heard this weird talk. We got like a talk on tape, and it was an older couple that was kind of like saying things like, well, if you have sex in different positions, it's inappropriate. And we're like, what? And so we went and asked our bishop. We sat down with our bishop and said, Bishop, give us a scoop on this. And he gave us great counsel. He's like, whatever you two feel comfortable doing, but you both have to be comfortable doing it, you can do it. And I thought that was the best advice, because I was like, wow, that makes total sense. Because if it's something I wanted to do, but my wife's like, I don't feel comfortable with that, it's like, then you don't do it. Like you got to have a consensus, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah. And I just want to point out, like Cindy said, it's important to have fun, laughing conversations about sex. And I totally agree. I think when I say mature, I mean like respectful, right? As opposed, which you can totally laugh and have fun and still be like respectful of each other.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Exactly. What are your thoughts, Caleb? I know that these are big things.
No, I think it's healthy to talk about those things. I think if you don't talk about some of these issues or all of these issues, the issues that you might be holding on to, I don't think you're going to have a healthy relationship. I think getting it out, talking about it when you're dating, have those conversations. And then I also think continue your learning. Like, don't just let your learning stop about like certain things. Like, continue learning about, like, if your person struggles with say like PTSD, or they struggle with borderline depression or anxiety or another emotional issue, do research, continue that research, like help evolve yourself, so that way you can better support your partner. And I also think sex within marriage as well has to be consensual, always consensual.
Yes, absolutely.
Always, yeah.
Like that, there's on, and so some of those things, it's just about, I just think that you're all spot on, Corey. I think, and going to your bishop and having those conversations, go to someone that you trust, but go together. Don't let that be one-sided. Go to your bishop, go to someone you trust, and have those conversations if there's any fear or anything else.
Especially if like somebody you really like and you want to marry, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, we're only allowed to do it missionary style because I read somewhere where everything else was perverted and deviant. And you're like, whoa, time out. Let's get a priesthood authority in here, like a bishop or stake president or somebody who can clarify the doctrine. That way, you get on the same page, because then you just get into an argument. It's like, well, that's not what I heard.
There's some really good resources too of leaders of the church saying like it's between you and the Lord. Like what's happening in your bedroom is between you and your partner and the two of you and the Lord, and that's it.
Exactly.
Like, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think also take some of the, like, let the fear come down about sex. Let the fear come down about some of these tougher issues or unsettling issues that you might find unsettling. Let the fear come down and talk about them. I think when you bring them to light, a lot of your fears dissipate. In fact, I know they do, because you're able to vocalize it. You're able to bring it to the surface, and you're able to, you kind of hear yourself, and you're like, man, I sound really stupid right now. Like, what is my holdup on sex? Like, or what is, like, why am I struggling with this? And then you can start to kind of evaluate it as an individual and be like, okay, like, this is maybe where I need to work on it. This is maybe something I need to educate myself a little bit more on. I need to dive deeper into this. I need to ask people who, I might need to ask a therapist or a bishop or something about some of these fears that I have. But letting them be vocalized helps, I think, dissipate a lot of the fear as
So
well.
I'm just gonna add a little bit to that too. I think a lot of people react out of fear because they're unaware that it's fear driven.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
so if, you know, awareness is I know I say this a lot on the podcast, but awareness is huge. And if you can be aware of, you know, your reactions, it's going to make all the difference in the world. So with that being said, we are going to go ahead and open up for questions. If you have questions, please raise your hand. I don't know how to do it after like what, 500th podcast. I still don't know how to do it.
You can go to your reactions button and click it there, or you can do Alt Y. As you can see, I'm clicking Alt Y and my
Yep.
hand's going
Here I
up.
am. Look, there it is. Oh, there it's gone.
Or
There it
do
is.
it Option. If you have an Apple, you can do Option Y.
So if you raise your hand, we will ask you to unmute and do your video. Just ask the question and then mute yourself again and do your video. And then at the after party, we can talk further.
Yeah. Or you could come on and give us your comments. Like, what are your fears? Like, are you impatient? Are you not impatient? Are you too patient where like you're going to be 60 years old and go, boy, I was sure patient, but I didn't meet anybody. Like,
or even like, what are some things that you notice about yourself, you know, with certain situations that we've already discussed? I mean,
and
or even, go ahead, Caleb.
Oh, I was going to say, I think opening it up to like this and opening it up, it helps you see that we all struggle with similar fears.
Yeah.
You know, we're all human. We struggle with similar fears. We struggle with similar anxieties. You know, and I think that's the beauty of it as well, is admitting, you know what, like I got a problem. And you're like, oh, like, hey, I have that same problem too, or I have a similar problem. So
yeah. So it looks like we have a hand raised. Is it Myrna? Myrna, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and
tell us how to say your name clearly.
Yes, please. I know I butchered it. I'm so sorry.
Hey, sorry. I was cutting out for a second because I went out to start the barbecue. So the Wi-Fi kind of wigged. Hey, Caleb, good job. Bring those Idaho peeps back down. Let's play some more.
Okay.
So my comment was, I don't know where I want to be. Sorry, hang with me. I'm trying to do 3 things at once. Dinner time. So I see this a lot in the groups, like people that are so afraid to get back into dating, or maybe they haven't even really ever, like never married, I don't know. And sometimes it's just like little comments like, oh, experiencing this on a date or that on a date. And people are like, what's a date? I haven't been on a date in years. And it's like, get out there. I don't know. Like, have you guys ever experienced that or had someone close to you that explained that to you? Like why they have?
Okay. So I feel targeted. So after my marriage, I got involved with a person and he proposed right away. Talk about 4 months. He proposed and I just wasn't ready. And I didn't feel that he was right. I felt like I was prompted to just not accept the engagement. So in my eyes, it was like, well, if I'm not accepting the engagement, why continue dating? So I broke things off. Then fast forward, I got involved in a very unhealthy relationship for about 5 years that literally was worse than my marriage. And I needed time afterwards. I gave myself about 7-8 years. And I needed that time. I needed that time to be able to focus a little bit more on my kids and make sure that they were okay and deal with everything at hand. And I was just like, you know what? I'm not putting a time limit on this. When I feel it's ready and I'm ready, then I will go back into it. I think a lot of people don't want to explain that. I'm pretty open about it now, but I wasn't back then. I would kind of,
if you know that, and there's a reason for that, but it seems like there is kind of a stuck in mom and dad's basement.
I will say that is pure fear. That is literally what we were talking about. That is definitely fear-based.
I agree. I think you also have to like, you have to take a shot at some point. Well, you don't have to. That's personal choice. But I think if you want to progress and you want to try to move forward, you have to take that chance, regardless of what may happen. That you just have to try.
Yeah, I mean,
Makes me think of Hamilton.
brother.
Not gonna miss my shot. Go ahead.
I don't know. I see that from my brother, and I think maybe because he was married twice. He married the same woman twice. He's not in the church. But she was bipolar, and man, the stuff she put him through. But he just, I don't know. He doesn't get out there. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't have any kids. He goes to work. He comes home. It's like, get out there, go find something. He thinks that the Lord is just gonna, one day this Mrs. Wright's gonna ring the doorbell,
Yeah, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah,
well, also his fear, like a lot of people mistake borderline for bipolar because of their hot, cold, and their black and white thinking, like, and their mood swings are so broad. Like they could be the most wonderful person, for 2 days, and then they can go right to being the most evil person, an angry person the next.
And how they, and that's the thing is like borderline often, the mood switches are very quick, as opposed to like bipolar, it tends to be longer stretches of like manic episodes versus not. But yeah, it can be super quick, and it's also like about the person. Like a person in their life can go from being like an angel to a villain and back again within like seconds. Like, where they're either the best person or they're the worst person. But that also brought up, that comment brought up to me the thought of like the difference between like patience, like understanding the difference between patience and like not taking action. Right? That those are two different things. Like in order to be like, real patience comes from taking action and being patient in the results. It's not like just sitting back and waiting for something to happen to you, right?
Yeah, nothing ever happens. Nothing ever happens if you just sit back. Like you, like life is action.
Well, thank you, Myrna, for that question. I think that's how you say your name. So Susie has a question. If you can unmute yourself and undo your camera.
Hey, sorry. The camera, it says that your video, the host has disabled it. I'm not sure.
Oh,
okay. Let me see if I can fix that for you really fast here. Go ahead if you have a question.
Well, I have more of a comment.
There you go.
Hi.
There you go.
yeah. Hi.
I'm a huge fan of my good friend Kaleb, who's on here. Yes, because he knows I adore him more than chocolate. And
that's good that I don't adore him more than chocolate.
See, we're nicknaming him White Chocolate. So.
White chocolate.
Yeah, exactly.
So I have a comment. So I was going to talk about just say something about vulnerability. Like I have some other friends that are on here listening to, because we're huge supporters of Mr. Kaleb. For me, vulnerability is like something that I have often prayed, like I prayed about, especially after the when my husband passed away. I prayed for humility, and I prayed for vulnerability. And I think one of the hardest things for me is that I am extremely vulnerable, because it does open me up. It's good and bad, because it does open me up to feeling all the feels. And so when so I'm very honest about my feelings. Kaleb and Cindy and the others will tell you. I will always tell you like how I feel. And you'll always know how I feel because you can hear it in my voice. You'll hear it. Thank you. You'll hear it in my voice. You'll see it in my face. And you'll always get that honest answer. And even though it is also very difficult, thank you. It allows, and you guys mentioned this earlier, it allows the person that you are you're in a relationship, whether it be a friend or a boyfriend or whoever, to open up their hearts in a way that they've never been able to even maybe before as well. So for example, I'm currently in a very, very beginning relationship where I have been able to express my feelings in a way where he has never, ever had anyone come across like someone like me, because no one has been open like me. And so when I do that, he loves that because he's like, wow, I've never had someone be so open before ever. But it also scares them, right? It gives them it puts them also in a vulnerable space because they've never been able to like have somebody like that. And so it scares them a little bit because they're like, holy crap, I'm saying things that I've never said before. And I'm now feeling things that I've never said before. And so it can be a little scary. And so my comment here is that it is very much okay to be vulnerable. It is something very beautiful when you're able to express yourself in a way where you can make somebody see things and feel things that they've never felt before.
And just where you can help people feel safe, like that's
it
huge.
It is. And I've always been pretty open, but never have I been as vulnerable as I am before. So I mean, one of my friends that's on here, Cindy Lou, she knows I literally was in the shower, like she couldn't see anything, but crying, like just expressing my feelings, like, because like I needed to get it out. And she is open to like receiving what I say. And I don't know if she was like this before knowing me, but she might have been, but I know she is like from when I met her to like now in a relationship, our friendship that we have right now, like I've seen her grow even more because she's amazing, but she's even extra amazing just because we're so vulnerable, like open with one another. So my comment is like, I know it can be scary to be vulnerable, but it's also beautiful. And when you share things like that with somebody else, you can grow, you can make a relationship, friendship, boyfriend, whatever, grow into something so amazing where you can be open to say whatever you want to say and still feel safe. So yeah. I feel that that is like one of the things that helped me through my marriage. I was married for almost 27 years. And the only reason why we're not together is because he's in heaven serving a mission as in heaven. So I am so appreciative of what you guys are talking about today, because it really means a lot to me, because it is exactly how I feel. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Susie.
And go ahead, Kaleb.
I think like that is like that safe space is what we need. Like I think that's what makes you Mr. Right or Mrs. Right. is how is what you do to people, to the way you treat people, in order to let them be vulnerable, let them to open up, allow them to express who they are. I think that's how you become Mr. Right or Mrs. Right. Create that safe
Yes,
space for them.
exactly.
Yeah, I agree. And Cindy brought up like an interesting point in the chat too, of just like that she's not vulnerable with everyone. And I think that's really an important thing to bring up, right? Like, be a safe space for other people, but recognize when they are not a safe space for you. That being vulnerable and creating safe spaces is also about creating healthy boundaries and recognizing when like maybe that person isn't the best person, right, to be vulnerable with at any given time. So it's important to be discerning, right, in this process as well.
Thank you for whoever said that my legs are pretty. And yes, I'm not going to the Boise Bash, but if I was, I would bring those socks. Sorry, that's from 31 plus.
Okay, any more questions or comments? Anything you guys want to share out there, please jump on with your hand up and let us know. But I'm sure we're all in the same boat. I'm sure we all have interesting stories. Please jump on and share. But yeah, so I think that's the biggest, I think for all of us, the challenge is, and it's interesting because we do have high expectations. I mean, I keep going back to that because it's something I've been practicing the last few months of kind of lowering my expectations. Like I lower my expectations about movies. I lower my expectations about my career, about buying a house, like all those types of things. I just don't want to set these bars way too high. And I think in the church, we do that. We're like, well, I want a guy who's never made a mistake, after he got a divorce, never made a mistake sleeping with a woman. Like, I want a guy who's never, and they have these really, really high expectations, probably that no guy can ever live up to. Like, oh, he's got to do this, he's got to do that, he's got to have this kind of job, he's got to have, I don't know, whatever your expectations are.
Either high expectations or expectations that don't really matter, right?
Yeah,
like in the long run, like, because there's sometimes where I'm like, people will be like, oh, I want a return missionary, I want this, and I'm like, I don't think those things necessarily matter. Like, maybe they matter if you have a specific reason. So like, my ex wanted to marry a woman who had served a mission, specifically because he felt like a woman who didn't serve a mission would not understand why he had struggled so much with his, and why he didn't think it was like the best 2 years of his life, right? And so he had like a very specific goal for that want. But in general, I'm like, I don't really think it matters that much. Like, whether someone went or not doesn't tell you anything about the type of person that they are. Like, it doesn't tell you about the type of person they are until like the reasons behind where they went, like what struggles they had, what they learned from it, what they experienced. Like, not, just the fact itself doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
it's everything that's behind that decision.
I'd rather have a woman that struggled, that went through struggles and learned from her struggles, than somebody who never did. Because then I'm like, oh, great. So are you gonna then use me as somebody? Are you gonna go through your tough times while I'm married to you?
Right? Yeah.
Like, I had an affair, but I'm learning from it. It's like, oh crap, I didn't really want to, did not really want that during this marriage. It's like,
and we see you, Nick. We'll bring you on. But but that made me think about like, I dated a guy once who was like, I want to marry someone, I don't want to have any fights while I'm dating someone. And I was like, what, are you kidding me? I was like, I want conflict to come up when I'm dating, because we're going to have conflict. Like, everyone has conflict. I'm like, I want to see how that person handles conflict. Right. Like, exactly. I want to see how I handle conflict when I'm with that person. Like, I was like, that's just not healthy to be like, no, I don't want any conflict in dating at all.
Yeah. That's just too much.
Well, and I think as well, like, sometimes it's just good to just have somebody who's genuine and honest with their struggles, and that way, because you can ask those questions like, well, how did you handle it? How did you fix it? And you kind of get a really good idea very quickly on how they handled it.
Exactly. Okay, I think we've got Nick on board.
Yeah, hi again. Not traveling this week, but one thing that
both.
Yeah. One thing that comes to mind hearing all this, how do people not compare, right? Like, I guess it's very common to compare to your ex, right? I mean, all the good things your ex did or you liked about, I mean, do you guys constantly compare, or how do you
No. I literally don't even compare my ex at all to anybody. I'm gonna be really honest. Can I be brutally honest? There was not one good day in my life with that man.
Yeah. Well, some people might have had some good things. That's what I mean. I have a neighbor 2 doors down that she's dated a little bit. She's Latter-day Saint. I'm a Latter-day Saint. But she also, when we're good friends, so we go out and eat once in a while. And she said, the word. So she was giving me a nice discussion on. She used to compare, and she's never been married, so I think she just has a laundry list of comparing of all the guys she dated and high expectations, and maybe that's why she's single. I don't know, but I like what you guys say. Set expectations a little low on the don't have the house clean, whatever. But I don't know. It's just a tough thing, I guess, right?
Yeah, I
And
think
I
we
will
want
say-
You all
high
gotta fall out of
expectations.
love with the spouse you were with before you move on, and that can take time for some people, right?
Well,
I've
mine
dated
was 5 years into my marriage, but I like I said before in the podcast, my situation's totally different than the majority of people. So
Yeah.
I've dated a lot of people, and I think for me, like a lot of people. And I think the thing for me is like, it's recognizing that everyone has their own strengths, that everyone has their own things that they bring to the table. Like, that's what kills comparison for me, because there are never going to be two people that are the same. And what someone brought to a relationship that was really awesome might not be what the next person brings to the relationship, but what the next person brings to the relationship is going to be different, but it's still going to be awesome, right? And maybe it's not awesome. Maybe this person is just somebody you don't ever want to be with ever again. That also happens. But I think the key to getting rid of those feelings of comparison is recognizing the beneficial differences that different people have. Like, recognizing how beautiful the diversity is among God's children and being grateful for that diversity and for the different blessings that different people bring into your life.
Kind of like goes along. Sorry, Corey, go ahead. Sorry. No.
Oh no, go ahead, Caleb.
No, I was gonna say, I think that's where true love comes in. Like when you're able to see the person for who they are, and not like flaws and all, and not be able to like not compare them to whoever, and go about it like that. See the person as a child of God, and that. So
Yeah, I think the comment about married versus never been married, I think for some people that might be a red flag, like never been married, especially. It's like the question comes to mind, and I hope I don't offend anybody who's never been married, but it's like, well, what happened for 20 years? It's like, what happened for 30 years? Like, what was it that kept you out of getting married for 30 years? That would be something maybe, might be something I'd be worried about. Like maybe that person does have very, very high expectations that I can never live up to. I was already in a marriage where that was the case, where I could never live up to expectations. The therapist used that analogy that I've shared before in the podcast is, being married to a borderline, trying to love a borderline is like trying to fill up the Grand Canyon with a squirt gun. That's what the therapist said. Like, it's virtually impossible to love the person to the level that they have expectations for. And so I think I worry that if somebody who's never been married for 30 years and they're like, oh, I want to marry you now, Corey, it's like, whoa, wait a minute, right? Well, what are the expectations that no man ever met for 30 years? Is there suddenly going to be those high expectations for me? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up in terms of whether someone's been married or not. Depending on, like, obviously, their age, the experiences that they've had, what kinds of things have been going on. Like, there's something there. I think, I don't know. And it's hard too, because I also know plenty of women who are my age who've never been married, who are like really awesome, amazing women. Right. And it just, the circumstances and whatever just hasn't been in their favor for finding a relationship that would last. Right. Or maybe they've just kind of found themselves in patterns of kind of dating like the wrong kind of guys or whatever. And so I think they're still can be room to realize that like it might not be that there's just like, I don't know,
Yeah.
unhealthy
Also,
expectations, right?
lower your expectations on like body types, because I know women want a guy who's 6 foot tall, but the majority of us out there are 5'8", so 5'9". So just keep that in mind, ladies, because they always hear the comments online like, I want a tall guy. It's like, I know one of the most wonderful couples in my ward, the guy is 5'8" and the woman is 6 foot. And they are the cutest, most wonderful couple.
That's awesome. I've always wondered like it's got to be something like evolutionary, whatever. I don't know, but it's always, or just social, like that people are like, oh, socially it's acceptable for guys to be taller, but I like don't get it.
Yeah, women are like, well, I want to wear heels, but I don't want to tower over my man. But
I hate wearing heels actually, but that's just me.
Doesn't matter. If I wear heels, I'm like with everybody else at that point. Because I'm a midget.
so somebody said, I know someone who only dated taller guys, recently decided to try dating someone her height or slightly lower with heels, and they really hit it off. See, sometimes the tall guys are jerks.
Hey, how tall are you, Corey?
Hey, I'm 5'8", so I can say that. No.
See, I think that's like, to me, I'm like, I think that's tall. And that's
for
plenty
some women,
tall.
they're like, oh, well, they're like 5'6". They throw the heels on and they turn 5'9", and they're like, whoa, I don't want to be taller than my man.
Oh my gosh. See, that's when you just say, okay, just go to therapy and deal with your insecurity about that. And let's get back together. I'm 5'6", Corey, and I think 5'8" is fine. So
okay, well, good. Yeah.
Plus, I've dated some really like sweet guys who are short. Like it's like shorter than me, which I also had that tendency of kind of like, man, I feel like I've been socially conditioned that I should only date guys who are taller than me, but like it doesn't matter.
Well, when you're short, you gotta come out with the personality, right? You gotta develop your personality. When you're tall, you just gotta walk in a room.
You could just be a jerk.
Smile. Like when you're tall, you just go in and smile, and all the ladies come walking over. So
if I say,
you gotta be funny.
So if I say that I want to only date guys that are taller than me, I actually do mean it. I'm 5'2", so.
Yeah,
Terry's very short.
That is different. Yeah.
There's no way around that.
But yeah, I've said this in the past, and Celeste gives me crap, but so I am slightly attracted to taller women, so I don't mind a tall woman. So I think some women feel like a guy will say no or not date them because they're taller than the guy, but not all guys are like that. And
yeah, and if they are, that's also about their own insecurity. So
true, that is true.
Yeah. But
so interesting comments, but let's see what else. There's a couple others like in here. Let's see. Terry, thanks for sharing your reason for stepping back from dating. I think we are healthy or working on being healthy into relationships. That is good. Okay. I have done that myself in certain ways. Nice. Okay. So yeah, I mean, these are, I think this is a good topic for tonight because there's just so many things that we're hung up on that we're just scared of, right? I mean, I don't know. It's just interesting, right? Because I have my fears, like my fear of being, I don't want to be a jerk. I don't want to hurt some woman who likes me and then I dump her because of my insecurities and fears, and that would make me feel like a jerk. I go home, I'm like, oh, I'm such a jerk, like I totally crushed that woman that was like invested in me and I'm broken still.
Well, and not only
about that,
not only someone who's invested in you, but like that you're hopefully invested in as well, right? Which is probably part of why you're feeling fearful. Like, I feel like a lot of those fears come up when we feel invested, right? Like when we're feeling that vulnerability, when we're feeling like we have real feelings, like that's when those insecurities strike the hardest. And I don't know, it's good to come up with like, an action plan for like, okay, I know myself well enough. I know this is how I react. Like, what am I going to do in that moment? Which in your case, Corey, might be going to this, whoever you're dating at the time and saying, hey, I really want to run right now. And this is why I want to run. These are the fears that I'm having. I want you to be aware so that you know that like this is my problem.
Yeah, I've said that.
know?
I've had to say, look, I've got an issue. I've got some, like, I call them triggers because they're like triggers. They are
Oh, they are
triggers, you
triggers.
know?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so I'll be just humming along just great. And then somebody will do an action that doesn't mean they're borderline, but they do an action that is very similar to what my borderline ex did. And
Yeah.
it triggers me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like you just feel the energy inside kind of shift on you. And you're like, I want to run.
Yeah. I always think it's really important for people that we're dating to know our triggers.
True.
Sure.
That is true. And I did share them with somebody. I mean, the person I came closest to marrying, she was not a member of the church. We dated for about a year, long distance, when I was in Mexico. And we talked about those triggers. And I had told her, I said, I'm feeling certain triggers. And it was a weird one. It was like, I bought her a Christmas gift and she had made a comment about something she liked and she was interested in. And I bought her something related to it. But then when she got the Christmas present, she was disappointed and she kind of reacted in a negative way towards it. And I was like, oh my gosh, for 22 years, no matter, even if my wife said, here is the SKU, here's the SKU number of the item that I want. And I went down and got the exact
It was never the
item.
right thing, right?
She's like, she would be like, oh, so out of all the items on the shelf, you pick the one that has a crack in it, or you pick the one that's broke, or well, that you really have a terrible consideration for me, right? So I always was wrong at buying the present, right? So that was a trigger for me. And, and when she did that, when she was like, I could tell in her face she didn't like the gift. And I'm like, you don't like the gift? She's like, well, I think you could put more thought into it. Boy, that triggered me. I mean, that triggered me like you had nobody's business. Like I was going to end the relationship right there at that moment. I was like, you're done. You're out of here.
Wow. That's
And
crazy.
it really kind of shook me for a second because that was exactly what my borderline ex would have said to me.
I think
Like you didn't put any
sometimes
thought into it,
Yeah.
I'm like, I got exactly what you said you liked. Well,
My mom and I have this relationship where if she gets me something that I don't like or whatever, I'm just honest with her and I can take it back. But I also realize too, I can't do that with everybody. And usually I'm very appreciative of anything. So I've gotten out of the habit of taking back gifts. I haven't done that since I was like 20 something, early 20 something.
Yeah, no, it was, that was a huge trigger for me. And
Wow.
I really do think that was something that I had a hard time getting over. And then there was a few other times where, like she was very insecure also. So she would call me out of the blue, like just call me. And then she'd be like, where are you right now? I'm like, I'm out with my coworkers from work, like she's like, well, why did you answer the phone? I'm like, because you get mad when I don't answer the phone. You get super suspicious. Like,
Wow.
so I felt like I was back in the same situation again, like with a borderline. I'm like, oh no. And it was like, trigger.
Oh, it's so hard when and sometimes it just can't work if people are just triggering each other. Like, even if it's totally not malicious.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I was really,
and
I had tried to share that with him. I'm like, look, you've got to know my triggers. Like, I mean, walking on eggshells is a huge trigger. If I feel like I have to walk on eggshells, I can't be honest with you. I can't express my feelings. I'm fearful that you're going to rage and get upset and cry and, and then make accusations against me. Like, if I feel like I'm walking that tightrope, I'm going to run. I'm going to be gone. So it's just,
well, and
it's
I think too,
thing.
once you recognize them and like you said, just communicate it, that's the job of the other person to just kind of store that away and be like, okay, I got that. Won't happen again, kind of thing. But yeah,
it's weird.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're at the end of the show.